Hello there. Welcome back to the R.M.Williams OUTBACK podcast, where we shine a light on all the absolutely fantastic things that are happening and the fantastic people away from the bright lights of our cities. We focus on the 3 R's of Australia. That's remote, rural and regional. We're just like the beautiful R.M.Williams OUTBACK magazine, except for your ears. I'm Terry Cowley, one of the journalists on the magazine and also your podcast host. Settle in with us and you'll get to meet some really great people, and I don't mean me. Have a question? Find out more at outbackmag.com.au. So today I am joined by OUTBACK contributor Mandy McKeesick, because we're at about the stage where we start to think about the next issue of OUTBACK, and that's issue 163. And I really couldn't go past getting Mandy on the podcast because she's, it's practically the Mandy McKeesick edition, isn't it, Mandy? 4 stories. You've been busy.
I have been busy. All I can say in my defence is I don't choose which issue these stories go into. So, yes, I've been busy, but we'll blame Terry and Mark and the team for actually shoving them all in the one edition.
Well, obviously they're good ones, and they're from slightly different parts of the country. Obviously, when we're putting the issue together, we're always looking for that geographical variety you've contributed to. I've got them all here, pieces of paper, of course, because the magazine doesn't physically exist yet. We haven't printed it yet. So the tracks story, the up-close story, the town story, and the garden story. So you've been tiptoeing across all the different, not just geographical areas, but different areas of content, Mandy.
Yeah, and it's been good. It's probably from the south, down in Coorong in South Australia, up through New South Wales to pick up the garden story. Fallon was sort of southern Queensland, and, the up-close story was central Queensland. So basically, let's say from Blackall to Kingston in South Australia. That's the swathe.
And you're a Queenslander, so that's a sort of your backyard, a very large backyard.
Yeah, Mark once said I was stateless because I'm not. I was born in New South Wales. I lived in WA for a long time. I farmed in New South Wales and then Queensland, and we're still in Queensland. But I quite took that as a compliment that he said stateless, because I'm definitely not a parochial Queenslander. I do feel like I just want to be all over the country.
And you're pretty much full-time roving about, doing stories for various publications?
Well, yeah, full-time photojournalist, so a lot of that is roaming around the country, and that is my favourite thing to do. Although, having said that, the last month I've been nailed to the office because it can't be fun and games all the time. You've actually got to sit down and write sometimes and do all the other admin that comes with running a small business. So, yeah, August has seen me nailed to the desk, so I'm pretty keen to be back on the road tomorrow, even for a short trip.
Yeah, it keeps you connected to what it's all about, hey?
Oh, definitely. Look, there's nothing better than getting inland and getting back with those people and those landscapes that I love.
Well, perhaps if we start with talking about your track story, it was on the Coorong. The heading for it is Chasing Storm Boy. I thought it might be a nice way to start for you to read the start of your story, which is, of course, the start of the novel Storm Boy.
Let's do it, because I think there's no better way to open a story on the Coorong without quoting Storm Boy and some of the beautiful lyrics that he uses in his writing. So the quote goes, "His home was the long, long snout of sandhill and scrub that curves away southeast from the Murray mouth. A wild strip it is, wind-swept and tussocky, with the flat shallow water of the Coorong on one side and the endless slam of the Southern Ocean on the other."
I bet you wish you'd written that.
I did, for this story.
Now, I'm a little bit hesitant to say who he is because I grew up saying Colin Thiel, but that's not how you pronounce it, is it?
It's not. It's Thiele, I think.
I think it's Thiele.
Thiele, is it?
Yeah,
I grew up with Thiel as well.
The novel, as you mentioned, and 2 movies. Beautiful scenes of the young boy with the pelican on the windswept shore. They really stayed with me, and they obviously stayed with you because it inspired this trip.
It did, and everywhere you go along the Coorong, you don't have to go far before someone mentions Storm Boy, or they say this is where it was filmed for this film, or this is where this scene happened in the second film, or I grew up with Storm Boy. Just about everyone has got that connection to it.
And it just shows the power of storytelling, because this was a 1964 novel.
Yeah, correct. And yet I met people on the beach there that are specifically there because their kids, which, 5 and 6, have read Storm Boy, and they want to come to the Coorong to find Mr. Percival, the pelican. It's an ageless story.
Amazing. So essentially, it's not a huge area that you covered, 200 kilometres from Kingston, the southern gateway, up to the mouth of the Murray. But there's a lot in it, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And we talk about the Coorong as being that whole stretch, but the Coorong's pretty much the lagoons, which is on the eastern side of the dunes. And the Coorong's divided up into basically 2 lagoons, the southern and the northern. And then between them and the Southern Ocean, you've got the Young Husband Peninsula, which is sand dunes, pretty much. And I think, 150 kilometres of that is national park. So you start in Kingston, SE, as they call it in South Australia, where they love catching their lobsters, and you can, in theory, drive from Kingston to the Murray Mouth along the beach, but that would require playing chicken with quite a few tides, and I don't think it's recommended for anybody.
So yes, as you say, you can go on the beach or obviously travel by bitumen, or you can canoe part of it. And I believe you were able to sort of indulge your own love of paddling on this trip.
I do. Paddling's one of my favourite things to do. Yeah, when I'm at home here, if I'm not in the office, I'm looking at the wind and seeing how often I can get down and paddle. But yeah, I think that was our last day in the Coorong. We went paddling with Brenton from the Coorong. And here's just a mine of information that I wasn't really sure what was happening for the day. I thought maybe it's just going to be an hour paddle around, but it ended up being a 6-hour expedition, and you paddle and you stop and you have lunch and you walk over to the beach and catch cockles and you look at the birds, and he knows so much. It's one of those brains where I'd love to take a little USB stick and shove it into the back of his brain and download everything and take it with me.
Back of his brain. I was a bit worried about where you were going.
Brain, Kerry, brain.
Okay, so we've talked about Storm Boy. We haven't mentioned pelicans specifically, although, of course, Mr. Percival was a pelican. So there's no accident that the chief sort of character, or one of them of the book, was a pelican, because it is a major breeding site for pelicans, isn't it?
It is, and you do see the pelicans everywhere you go. I think we started seeing them at Kingston and then along the Southern Lagoon, up even when you have to leave the Coorong itself to go around the lakes Alexandria and Albert. Even as you're crossing on the car ferry there, you've got pelicans watching and waiting for you.
And they're sort of one of those birds that we do see reasonably regularly. It's not like a seagull, but we do see pelicans reasonably regularly. But I still marvel at them because we have quite a few at our lake in Shepparton where I live, and I am always really taken with them. I think it's their size. And then when you see them flying quite high up, I'm always taken with them because it's like they almost look too big to fly. But then I think in your story, I think I read that they're only 7 kilograms in weight, which I'm amazed by. I thought that if you had to guess, you would probably have said, say, 40.
Exactly, and that's what Brenton does on this canoe trip. He asks you that question. He says, all right, how much does a pelican weigh? And of course everyone says, 20 kilos, 30 kilos.
Yeah.
Something like that. And he said, no, 7. He said, if you come across a dead pelican and you pick it up, you'd be surprised just how little it does weigh.
Although, what's that saying about pelicans?
His beak can hold more than his belly can, something like that.
Yeah, so I guess it would depend on how much is in his beak or his belly.
I guess so, yeah. And another bit of trivia with the pelicans is, well, that's what they say here, is they can hold the equivalent of a carton of beer in their bill.
Wow, okay, yeah. No, so they're just one of those birds that command attention, I think.
They do.
So tell me a bit more about the Coorong. You have a lot of interesting facts in your story, which one would hope, because that's what we do in a magazine. But one, I've made a few notes here. The Coorong is believed to be the home of the largest population of Aboriginal people anywhere on the continent. I'm amazed at that, but I presume it's just that rich food source.
I guess so too. Yeah, I can't remember for the life of me at the moment where I got that from, but it's not hard to see why, because you have got such that rich food source. You have the Coorong itself, which has a lot of fish in that, and then the dunes themselves have so much native plants there. Again, Brenton from Canoe the Coorong can show you a lot of these and pick them up. And then, of course, you go over to the beach, so you've got a ton of cockles there, or you used to have a ton of cockles. We might get to that later. So it is a rich food source. And I guess coming down the river from the Murray, following that down as well, it would have been a meeting spot for a lot of people.
And I'm guessing they didn't eat pelicans because they were, I don't know if I'd say sacred, but they were totemic, weren't they?
They were, but from what I understand, because everyone's got a different totem, like if my totem was the pelican, I couldn't eat the pelican. But if yours was the echidna, then you could probably eat pelican, but not echidna. I'm not 100% on that, but I've got a feeling that's how it's been explained to me before.
Okay, and there were some interesting facts about the Chinese coming to the goldfields, landing there rather than Victoria to avoid the taxes.
Yeah, apparently when the gold rush started, I guess it was all tied up with what became the White Australia policy, but the Victorians obviously thought there was too many Chinese coming in to the country, so they actually put a tax on the Chinese landing. And South Australia didn't do that. So the way the Chinese got around it was land in South Australia, walk to Victoria and go gold prospecting.
Which was a long way. That's a walk.
A long way, and along the shores of the Coorong, you can see where they've quarried and they've built these stone wells to have freshwater stops along the way. They're quite fascinating, and you can still see them today.
One other fun fact, John Peggotty, I don't know if I'm saying the name right, the Birdman of the Coorong, South Australia's only recognised bushranger who, it's almost something like Mulga Bill's bicycle or something, escaping on a saddled ostrich?
I'm pretty sure he'd be the only bushranger that one rode an ostrich and two saddled one. But apparently he was a little guy and got away with it. And if you go up to Meningie, there's a statue and the story of him there. So that's worth a trip to Meningie. One for the Coorong burger, for the Coorong mullet burger, and second, to find out about a ostrich riding bushranger. Before we get off that story too, I've mentioned John and Valerie Sparrow, sort of use them as a guide through the story. And this is how it's an interesting example of how working as I do, how one thing leads to another, because it was probably about 4 years ago we were in the Simpson Desert towards the end of the day looking for somewhere to camp. We popped over a sand dune and saw this old couple camped on their own. And we thought, well, we'll give them space and keep going. But I did say to my husband at the time, that's my end of life plan. That's what I want to be doing when I'm 80. I want to be out here camped in the desert. And we connected with them a few days later. And because it was COVID years, we actually ended up locked down together for 4 days on an outback waterhole. So it was a really wonderful start to a friendship. And they're such beautiful people, and they live at Tailem Bend. So to have the opportunity to have locals like them guide me through the Coorong is just so much more than you can get from doing it from a tourist or from just lobbing in because you've read Storm Boy. So shout out to John and Valerie, who are just wonderful people and wonderful adventurers, and yes, I'm a couple that I look up to for sure.
I'm intrigued. How do you get locked down on a waterhole in the outback?
Well, that story, we're in the Simpson Desert, COVID times, and of course you've got no communications once you're in the desert. There's no mobile phone or anything.
So how would you even know you're supposed to be locked down?
We didn't even know. No, we rocked up to Dalhousie on the way out of the desert, Dalhousie Springs, and the rangers there said, oh, you can't go anywhere, and you can't go to Oodnadatta, you can't go to William Creek, you just can't. And we thought, well, we did, for some reason, the party decided not to stay at Dalhousie, and we looked at a map, and I saw on the map it said Aringa Waterhole, and I said, oh, she's a bit of a bet, but let's have a crack, we'll go up there. And it was probably another 3 hours drive away. and the most magic waterhole that you could possibly want in the middle of the outback. Just, would have been a kilometre of water maybe, full of yabbies. And of course, John and Valerie had already parked up on the other side because they know all the secret spots. Yeah, so we spent about 3 days there with them, and someone had taken pity on them and given them what turned out to felt like half a side of beef to keep them going. So they shared it with us, and we ended up just having to subsist on beef and yabbies for 4 days. So she was a hard life in lockdown, I tell you.
So I mentioned the declining health of the southern Coorong, particularly due to over-extraction of water upstream. Do you want to fill us in on what the concerns are there? I mean, it's pretty well documented.
I think there's multiple reasons why the southern Coorong in particular is in trouble, and one of them is the drainage of the wetlands around that area. Originally, all the wetlands drained to the Coorong, to the southern Coorong, but when those wetlands were drained to make arable farming land, because they're really, really rich, and I don't know the politics or the reasons why, but those drains, instead of being sent to the Coorong, were sent directly to the ocean. So the southern Coorong lost all that inflow of water that it needed. And yes, there's other factors contributing, but the southern Coorong's not in a particularly good way at the moment. It's hypersaline, and it is struggling. And it's not really till you get to the northern Coorong, which is closer to where the Murray River comes in and where the barrages are, that I guess they control the water in there a little bit better. So when we were there at middle of March, the northern Coorong was looking quite good. But of course, since then, we've had this horrible, horrible algal bloom in South Australia, and, the cockle industry that was going so well while we were there, and we got onto Goolwa Beach and were catching cockles probably, as it turns out, a couple of days before the algal bloom really got kicking. So I think, I'm not really sure how bad it is in the Coorong, but it's terrible in a lot of spots in South Australia. So we've really got to cross our fingers and look at what we can do differently, I think.
A couple more fun facts. Australia's only inland lighthouse is in the Coorong, which of course begs the question, why?
And again, you only know these things because you meet up with people like John and Valerie who know the back roads and know where we can go. But it's because there's this narrow little neck between Lake Alexandrina and Lake Albert, and they're quite big waterways. So I guess people need to know where this narrow neck is, where they can get through. Hence, we have a lighthouse, Australia's only inland lighthouse.
And you mentioned Tailem Bend, which was the home of David Unaipon.
Yeah, he's on our $50 note. How many people know that? And he invented the first mechanical shears. So you can't leave him out of a story if you're mentioning Tailem Bend.
No. You also talked about the series of locks between the Murray and the Coorong and the seals that just hang out there for the fish. That must have been a cool sight.
It is. Look, I was fascinated by the seals when I first saw them. I saw them at Long Point, where I got up early to try and catch the sunrise, and I thought, oh, there's a seal, and I got all excited, and then 2 days later I'm going, oh yeah, there's another seal. But on the barrages, they sit there. The barrages separate the fresh water from the salt, and they're open to allow water flow when politics dictate. But the seals have got it. They also have fish gates in them, so the fish can move between the two, but the seals have got it sus. They just sit up there. As Joel from Spirit of the Murray said, the seals are sitting up there like at the drive-through of Macca's. They're just sitting there waiting for the fish to come by. And they do, and they're sitting there and they're that full, they're dozing away and they barely open an eye as the boats go through.
That's awesome. So there's a dredge that's been working for the past 23 years to keep the river mouth open to the sea.
Yeah, the dredge keeps the Murray mouth open. It's a lovely place, but it's also such an engineered place. What we as a species can do to an environment. In the natural world, there'd be nothing that the Murray mouth would come through its lake. The Murray River would come through the lakes and just drain naturally out its mouth. But there's 5 barrages now separating the river from the mouth, and the mouth itself needs to be dredged continuously to keep it open. That's what we do, isn't it?
I guess so.
We over-engineer our natural systems.
So you also, as I mentioned at the outset, wrote a story for our Up Close section on the Great Australian Charity Cattle Drive. Did you do the drive or did you join them on part of the drive? Or how did you cover that story, Mandy?
I did. I joined them on a couple of nights. I think the first couple of nights I was up at Blackall as they were coming through there. Had such a good time, got on a horse for the first time in a long time, got off a horse without anything serious happening to me, so that was pretty good. And then because I knew there was a good story coming up in Mitchell with a school teacher and the kids, I happened to be in the area, so I went back when they were closer to Mitchell and spent another night with them then. But wonderful camaraderie on the track from, Billy Prowl, the lovely drover who doesn't say a lot but says a lot in the few words that he does say, and the young team that he had. I think Jade was only 16, Brendan's 22 or something like that, a young team, and even Billy's son, 9-year-old Mason, who was doing his best to get out of schoolwork, but a great team all up. And then, of course, you had the organisers of the drive itself. While I was up there at Blackall, we had Chrissy Knott, who was looking after all the guest drivers and basically running the show. Top lady. We had a wonderful afternoon. It had been a busy day. A lot had happened. And Chrissy and I just looked at each other and she said, "We need a drink." So we went and got 2 camp chairs and 2 glasses of wine, and we rang up Billy on the two-way and said, "Billy, we're just going to sit in front of the cattle as they come through." And he said, yeah, righto. So, we plonked 2 camp chairs down exactly where the mob of cattle were coming. We had our wine and we just let the mob just peel past us. And it was just lovely, a bonding moment for Chrissy and I. And you could see Billy come past with a grin on his face, and he just said, "I didn't think you meant exactly in front of the cattle."
Oh. So just for a bit of background, it's a beef bank initiative, the Great Australian Charity Cattle Drive, to raise awareness about food insecurity in Queensland and to raise funds for those in need and to, of course, showcase the beef industry. It's a 775-kilometre trek from Longreach to Roma over 87 days. That's a long time. Paying guests, sponsored cattle, headline acts, and it really all started with Beef Bank.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Andrew Rogers, who's the chairman of Rotary Club of Brisbane Centenary, was a driving force behind that when they realised that Food Bank and associated charities really couldn't get beef. They tried to work out how to get red meat into the supply chain, and they worked out, and anyone that's been on a station will know that there's certain animals that maybe you can't put on a truck or they're never going to meet specifications. So the idea was to be able to get donated animals that could be then sent to abattoirs and not processed into your prime steaks, but processed into mince and sausages and stewing steak, all those cuts that can go a long way. So that was their idea. And, of course, the charity drive was put together to try and raise some funds to keep this going.
So the origins of Beef Bank, I think a Rotary Club was talking to Food Bank Queensland and they said they never received donated beef. And when you think about food banks, you tend to think about canned food and non-perishables, things like that. But red meat's a really important source of protein as well. So I guess this was a way of receiving donated beef and getting it out to those people who need it. So 1,680 steers and heifers on loan from various places, from Australian Country Choice, MDH and Stock Place Marketing, under drover Billy Prowl, as you said, and his young team. I was interested that you can do a 3-day experience for $2,250. I'd imagine that's an amazing experience for some people who've never done anything like that.
And I think they had the whole range of people, from people that had never ridden a horse but just sort of got tied up in the romance of being out on a stock route, to people that hadn't ridden for 15 years, to people that have been on a horse all the time. And Christensen, an 18-year-old, was a lovely example. He joined the drive with his father for a couple of days, and he's at uni at the moment, at uni in New England. But he so loved the drive and he was quite good on a horse that come university holidays, he went back out to actually work between Billy's team and between the main camp. And he was on a horse all the time and thought that was wonderful. Went from a paying guest to volunteering his time on the drive.
And the link with schools is a good one. You mentioned that earlier.
I think 60 to 80 of the cattle actually had GPS tags in them, so they could be tracked quite easily. And they linked one of these tag cattle to a school all the way along the line. So the schools could, see where their animal was, or see how much it was resting, or how much it was walking, how much grass it's eating. But so that there was always that school connection. But at Mitchell, with teacher Jeremy Heslop, they took it that one step further. He's got a great little ag class there, and he actually put it up to his students. They had to apply for a position to come on the ride. They had to attend school and keep up school morals and keep their marks up really well, and really had to prove why they wanted to be on that drive. And he narrowed it down to, I think, about 8 kids that jumped on the horses there at Mitchell. And one young fella, he'd never ridden before, and he was just stoked that it wasn't scary. He didn't think it was scary after a while, and now he wants to buy a horse. And yeah, just to have the ag teacher and a couple of helpers and these 8 kids, some were being led on the horses because they hadn't ridden before. It was just lovely, and I think Billy really appreciated just having more young people around as well.
Yeah, as we touched on previously, creating awareness of the industry. So that's a really nice uplifting story. You also covered a town story on Thallon between St George and Mungandai.
Yep, sure did. I went through Thallon a few years ago. I'm not sure where I was heading to or from, but I know I was in a vehicle with a lot of mechanical issues, and it felt like it was bucking the whole way. And we passed through Thallon, and it just had beautifully looked after, had sculptures up the main street, green grass. Just one of those places where you've had a really long day and you think, oh, this is just what I needed. And I thought, I need to come back to Thallon. I'd always been aware of it because of its silos. It's got 4 extravagant painted sunset silos out there, which are quite famous, and you will see on a lot of marketing and tourism stuff as you're travelling around the southwest, around St George. So that was a good theme to anchor the story on, but then to go and find out the other arts and their giant wombat, which is commemorating an endangered species of wombat in the area, and just to meet the people there.
Yes, it always is. But it is really interesting, the silo art, the street art, how it is really enlivening a lot of these towns. I'm sure 50 years ago, if you'd said to an old farmer, one of the ways we're going to get people to come to our town is through art, they probably would have laughed. But when we see pictures of these amazing silos in different places, we tend to think about drawing visitors. But I would imagine just having that beautiful art, just to look at it in your town, is uplifting in its own way.
I think it is, and where these silos are, it's unique, I suppose, because it's still a working grain depot, where a lot of these silos have been decommissioned. And I think they might have a few problems with that, where you got tourists wanting to come in closer to get photos, so they actually walk onto a working site. But it does, yeah, it's great. You see all the grain trucks coming in underneath the silos, and then just over the levee bank, you have all the caravanners there. And even, the locals do love it. They've turned it into a bit of an attraction. Every second year they have a long table dinner there under the silos. So it's become an attraction for, as you say, not only the travellers but the locals as well.
And you mentioned, of course, you've gone through the town and picked out various attractions and retreats and homesteads and hotels and things. But I was kind of interested in the Witchy Cafe. Tell me about that.
Well, Thallon's got 2 commercial outlets in the main street, and one is, of course, is the pub, which doubles as the post office and everything else that a pub does in a small town. And the other across the road is a cafe, and it's got cobwebs and spiders and witchy things in the front windows, and you might wonder what you're walking into. And when you do walk in, there's more of that theme all the way through. So the lady, Bronwyn Brown, who operates this cafe, she says that's her grandkids always refer to her as a witch. And she wanted to carry that theme through, mainly to show her kids and her grandkids that you can start with not a lot and you can have your own business. So that's her message she's trying to get across.
Yeah, cafes are interesting. They're becoming more of a thing. It's like every town needs to have at least one cafe. It didn't used to be the case. Maybe it used to be a milk bar perhaps, and maybe cafes are now sort of taking the place of what milk bars used to be, because coffee culture is seeping in everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, even Thallon. But I bet there's not many cafes where you get an eyeball sweet when you've ordered your coffee.
Might be.
Like literally, it's an eyeball. lolly.
We might finish up, Mandy, by talking about the remaining story you have in the issue in our gardens section. This is a garden in Moree, New South Wales, Tarrawingi Farm.
Yeah, that's Tarrawingi, set up by a young couple, Casey and Jacob Budd, down in Moree. And
this is a garden story about people with the last name of Budd.
Actually, and I'd never made that connection. So thank you for pointing that out. I'll have to go back to Casey and say that, yeah. Nope, never made that connection at all. I guess I didn't see it because I came across Casey before she was married, so I knew her as Casey Onus. And she impressed me so much years ago when I did meet her as a young agronomist, and just one of these straight shooting people that you always know where you're going to stand. And yeah, there's no bullshit about Casey. She's just a wonderful girl. And it doesn't surprise me at all that she's had this successful agronomy career and has turned around and is turning a garden now into a successful wedding venue, even though, as she says, she's the most introverted person in Moree and has no business running a wedding venue, but she's given it a red hot crack and it's going really well for her.
One thing I liked in the story was how you brought out the fact that, adversity breeds invention. They had this lovely garden, they moved in, and then they had a terrible flood, and they really had to, that overused phrase from COVID, pivot and sort of look at things differently, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. And the garden they inherited or they bought, it wasn't gifted to them, no, they did purchase it, but it was a long, well-established garden, and the lady had put lifetimes of work into it. And it was quite heavy maintenance. And Casey and Jacob they've got two little kids and they both still work. So they had to sort of pull it back to a garden that was easy manageable. So even though Casey works 3 days a week as an agronomist still, she's got two little girls to run around after. So, yeah, they've done a lot of pulling the high maintenance stuff out and replacing it with easier maintenance stuff. But, yeah, Casey she comes alive when she's in that garden.
Yeah, I guess that's what it's all really about, isn't it? Connecting with the earth.
Yeah. And she's out there in the mornings. When I was there, I was there overnight, but the first day it was just pouring rain and we just gave up. And the next morning even it was just foggy, but it sort of lent a different patina to the garden, just to have this mist falling in over the beautiful trees that are there and the great big pond. And yeah, didn't worry, Casey grabs the pram and grabs the kids, and out she goes gardening.
Don't come the raw prawn with me, Mandy.
You're going to need a lot of editing in this.
Or not. I might just leave it all in.
Leave it in, I don't mind.
So actually gardens was an idea of mine to include. We didn't used to have it. I really do like this section because it's not really about, it is about plants and it is about the garden, but it's really always about the people, and it's a way of telling their story. Just a little bit of their story through that connection with the ground.
I think so. Yeah, that's a really good way of explaining it, Terry. And I'm glad you came up with the concept of doing a garden one, because we do get a lot of different variety, and you might pick up the mag and it's manicured lawns one week and something a little rougher the next.
Yes, definitely. We definitely have done those sorts of beautiful homesteads with the European-style garden, but I think that definition of a garden can be very, very broad. Are you a gardener yourself, Mandy?
No, I'm a traveller. So I have a garden that has got lots of stones in it and weed matting, so I don't have to weed. I've got low-maintenance plants. We even sold our lawnmower before we came here because we came off a farm to town, but forgot about a council verge, so we had to go and buy a lawnmower, which I was a bit miffed about. But no, I need it very low maintenance so I can just drop it and leave it and head bush again.
Speaking of heading bush again, you're off again tomorrow. Tell us about that trip.
I am. I'm off tomorrow. The main objective of this trip is to pick up a couple of stories for a Rangelands Outback story that I'm putting together at the moment, which, rangelands, that's 70% of Australia, so she's a bit of a broad subject. We're talking about rangelands and pastoralists because 2026 is the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. So yeah, I'll be poking off down southern Queensland into northern New South Wales to go and sit with some cows for a while, which is, one of my favourite things to do.
Will you be sitting in front of them with a glass of wine?
Probably a glass of rum this time, knowing where I'm going. But yes, we will be out in the paddock with cows.
All right, Mandy. Well, yeah, fair enough. Thank you for your time before you head off again. Good to have you back on the podcast, and thank you for the very valued contribution you continue to make to our magazine. Safe travels, Mandy.
Thanks, Terry.
Hi, Terry back again. I really hope you enjoyed that episode of the R.M.Williams OUTBACK podcast. So we can continue to do what we do, please hit the plus button and subscribe to the free podcast so you'll know when new episodes drop. Oh, and please tell a friend who you think might like it. We'd also love to welcome you to the OUTBACK magazine family, so grab a copy every second month at your local newsagents or contact us directly and we'll have the latest edition sent to you anywhere in Australia with free postage. As I said at the outset, it's all at outbackmag.com.au. Don't be a stranger, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening.